Okay, so the next method that we discussed were that we need a common denominator to solve these. This allows us to have apples to apples, oranges to oranges. The same number of pieces. When something's broken up into the same number of pieces, we can compare them rather easily. And the nice thing about fractions is that we can rearrange the pieces without changing the value. We still have the same amount even if something's broken up into more or less pieces. So, to find common denominators between these, I told the students, if you multiply the denominators together, every single time, that will get you a common denominator. It might not be the least common denominator. It will get you a common denominator, and a lot of the times you don't need the least common denominator. If we're comparing these, we don't need the least common denominator. We just need the denominators to be the same, so that would be 10 times 5 equals 50, so our common denominator would be 50. And then we set the problem up. So 6/10, and then 1/5, and then times what fraction will equal what fraction, and what am I going to use as my common denominator? 50, 50, and then we get some algebra in there. Being able to do this is a great indicator of being able to successfully move into algebra. So 10 times what number equals 50? Well, it's 10 times 5. What we do to the bottom, we have to do to the top. We discussed that this is 5 over 5, which is equal to 1 whole. And we talked about how anytime you multiply or divide something by 1, it does not change the value. So even though I'm changing the pieces, 6/10 and 30/50ths are equal to each other. I just cut it up differently. 5 times what gives me the 50? 5 times 10. When I do the bottom, I have to do to the top. Because if I don't do the same to the top and the bottom, or to the bottom and the top, it will change the value. It's no longer multiplying by 1 or dividing by 1. Okay? And then I can see that, we could have, the kids that are really honing in would have realized right away that bigger than the half, less than the half, but that's a great way to check. If you still like doing it the long way and then checking it mentally, or you did it mentally and you want to make sure that you did it mentally correct, okay, we can do that. But we can see that this is 10/50ths and 30/50ths. Now that they're apples to apples, we can see that 6/10 is bigger. And we also discussed that, the little tricks of the trade, like if I had to find a common denominator, I always say, can 5 go into 10? Yeah. So I can use 10 as a common denominator. Saves me, so this would be 2/10. And then we can see that this is still smaller. And we discussed, we drew models. So to show 1/5. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, and I have one of them. And if I take that same model, and if I cut that model in half, it's to show 2/10, even though it's broken up differently, you can see that I have the same amount. Okay? And then we're into adding and subtracting fractions now, and we're using the common denominators, and we're getting to that point where we're not relying, but that will always get you a common denominator, but the smaller numbers are always easier to work with.